Hey everybody, Dr. Snellgrove here, just doing a quick recording talking about our second major assignment in technical report writing. And I was kind of chuckling to myself writing out the assignment because I was like, well, this is the inevitable one because you're taking technical report writing and well, here we are, we're about to write a technical report. So by the time this video is up, the description of the assignment is on Canvas. So I do encourage you to follow along, but I'm just gonna hit on the highlights here. So first off, I'm going to be uploading, I believe sooner rather than later, a separate video on this matter. But the technical report section starts on page 168. I was about to hold the book up, it would just look backwards to you, wouldn't it? But it starts on 168 and it describes different kinds of reports. And honestly, like, it's kind of obvious. Yes, there's about as many types of reports as there are issues you could report on. So I decided to keep it a little easier, a little more straightforward for all of our sakes. So this assignment is focusing on writing a recommendation report. And that's, I mean, exactly what it sounds like. You work for, this can be fictional. I'm skipping ahead a little bit because once again, you get to pick your own topics. And so there's a thing on here where, you are writing to an organization, like to a decision maker in an organization, and you are recommending a course of action. So if you're comfortable doing so, if they're comfortable doing so, I'd be fine with you doing this as a report to an organization you're currently in, even if you never send it in. But this can also be fictional. A lot of people, a lot of college students, they constantly get asked that annoying, what are you going to do when you grow up? So this could also be you future forecasting, like I'd like to work for such and such company, and this is the kind of recommendation that I'd make. But anyways, once again, you get to pick your topic in what some would call painstaking detail. I've outlined on here the different things that you need to have for this particular report. So it's like, all right, we have to have a memo headline. So it's like, what is the date? Who are you sending this to? As I said a minute ago, and I put on the assignment, can be real or fictional. Who it's from, that's you. You're presumably real and not fictional. What the subject is. So broadly, what is this about? And then that's followed by action required, which is, hey, what are you recommending that they do? All right, so then we get into an intro, and this may go without saying, but I'll say it anyway because that's my whole brand. This whole thing is very different from a traditional academic paper. I mention that because, I think I may even have some former students in here. And so like, if you skip down to the end, as you're scrolling through on Canvas, it's like, okay, it's a 5-page paper. It's 5 sources. It's kind of like I'm back in 1101, 1102. It's like, well, it's sort of, but what you're doing in all of these sections is very different. And the way you lay this information out, for that matter, is very different. So for instance, we have an intro, after the memo heading, the intro is what you have in here. It's like, what do we put in the intro? It's like, all right, what is the purpose of the report? It's like, what have you researched? Why have you researched it? What is your background or rationale? Like, why, what led you to making this recommendation? Because like, you're making a recommendation because you think things need to change for the better. Okay, so what is it that, led to that? Report development, which is like, all right, tell us what topics you are covering. And we've got some examples of this in the book, and I'll try to get some maybe more relevant examples on Canvas. Hopefully by next week, don't hold me to that, but hopefully by next week. But I was just say that section is kind of like, at least the end of that, as I put on here, report development is kind of like a preview of what you're going to get into. And that brings me to something that I guess I should have circled back to this a little earlier. When I say that this is very different from a traditional academic paper, that's true for a number of reasons, but one of the big ones is that in an academic paper, you would get well, how to put this? Your teachers would probably get onto you if we have maybe redundant information, like, hey, you already said that on page 2 or something like that. And so it's like, all right, well, here, you are, in some ways, you are going to, oh, that's weird. Just got an email from someone saying, you got back to my emails. Like, I haven't gotten your emails. We'll solve that mystery in a minute. But in the nature of any kind of recommendation report is people skim through it. that kind of skim through the subheaders and stuff like that. And so you're going to effectively be putting, similar information in multiple places across the document. That's not to take up space, at least I hope that's not what you're trying to do, but instead the idea is it's a technical report. Some people are going to read the whole thing front to back. Some people are just going to read like a summary and intro. Some people are just going to skim the headings. So you're putting key details in multiple places so the maximum number of people will get that info. All right. So anyways, after that report development, we have a summary. And so the summary is like, what are the main points? What are the findings that you've made as part of your research? We'll talk more about research later, and what your recommendations are. And so this is, you can start seeing the idea of redundant information, right? It's like, didn't I mention my recommendations in the memo field? I did. And now you're putting them in, a summary section here. And then I put a little note that's like, hey, if you want, the summary can be a separate like subheader section. I recommend you organize all of this by subheaders. Or you can fold that into your intro. If you just want to have the summary be the end of your intro rather than a separate section, that's fine too. All right, but now the discussion section is kind of like the meat and potatoes. If you have to compare this to an academic paper, this is the equivalent of the, the body paragraphs. Because the discussion sections I put on here, use subheaders to divide this into specific points you described previously, in the report development section in more detail. And if it helps, I put on here, think of this as the section where you basically sell the audience on the idea of why your recommendation is so important. So in case you were curious, one of many reasons that I chose to go with a recommendation report was, even though it is very different from an academic essay, this has some close kinship, I think, to like an argumentative essay, because you're making a recommendation. People aren't automatically going to agree with your recommendation, so you need to convince them. And so this doesn't have to be like a you're on the soapbox ranting style argument, but in the discussion, you talk about these different things, you integrate some of the research that you're going to do for this assignment, and basically sell us on the idea like, well, dang, they're right. We do, in fact, need to take this course of action. All right, after the discussion section, we have a conclusion section where you reiterate the main points. I put on here similar to summary, but please don't just copy and paste, and try to end things on a memorable note. And I probably should have put "in" things in like quotation marks or something, because after that, no pun intended, I recommend you have a recommendations section. Yes, Virginia, this is technically going to be, I think, at least the third time that you touch on your specific recommendations, right? And I put a little note in here, same thing I just talked about, that like the redundancy is important because people are skimming through. So for those of you that are keeping track at home, that means that your recommendations are appearing in the memo section at the tippy top of the paper. It's going to appear as part of your report development. I think that would be in kind of like summary section, and then it's going to appear here at the end. So it's not quite middle, but I was going to say it's almost like you're hitting those recommendations up beginning, middle, end. So no matter who's scanning through or how they're reading it, how they're processing information, everyone's going to walk away from this knowing exactly what your recommendations are. All right. I keep mentioning research. So you do have to have a reference page. Well, maybe I should back up. You do have to have a minimum of 5 sources, and you do have to have a reference page at the end. It doesn't count towards the overall page count. That gives us your references in APA format. I put a weird little note in here. It says, I'm not placing any particular limits on the kinds of sources you should use, but they should be authoritative, informative, and generally provide proof for the actions you are recommending. So I've left this open because the kind of research you can conduct must be open because the topic is largely open. But as I put on there, it's like you need good sources. I'm sure y'all wouldn't do this to me, but I've had in recent days like Composition 1 students trying to like, how do I cite Quora in my paper? how do I cite Wikipedia in my paper? How do I cite Reddit in my paper? And I'm like, you don't. Those, I use those things. Hell, I got a Reddit tab open right now, but they're not great sources of authoritative or formal information. And in all seriousness, if you do have trouble researching your topic, finding good sources, or if you just want to run some sources by me and get kind of a Roman thumbs up or thumbs down, just let me know. But yeah, I think that's about it. I'm going to be putting basically an outline assignment up at the same time as the video, at the same time as the assignment description, roughly. And so this is similar to what you did from before with PowerPoint. Like I always like to remind students, you're not locked in any kind of course here when you, what do you call it? You are not locked in a course if you are like, maybe you upload something today and then you wake up tomorrow like, I don't want to write about that. I want to do a different topic. You can do that. You reserve the right to do that. That is a-okay. But as always, if you have any questions about any of it, any concerns about any of it, feel free to email me. Feel free to text me at 863-835-2399. Y'all have a good one. Bye.